I just wrote my last paycheck and there's nothing left to pay the bills. I'm in complete shit. In the construction business, if you don't pay your bills on time, all the suppliers refuse to work with you and avoid you like the plague. I went to all the banks in the city, but as soon as they saw me, they immediately closed the doors. Looks like I'm done with this job and I urgently need to find something new. In my 34 years, I have never found myself in such a situation. I have always been successful and made good money. To my regret, I never finished college. I dropped out of school and started working for my father's construction company. Most people my age have had problems with their parents. I was probably luckier than others. My father was my hero and best friend. Since childhood, he took me with him to work, gave me small tasks and paid for them. He taught me everything I know about construction, and I love this profession. As I said before, my father was my hero. It is clear that we spent a lot of time outdoors. When we weren't working, we hunted and fished. That's when I started carrying weapons. When you're outdoors or on a construction site in Nevada, you encounter a lot of snakes, both those that crawl and those that walk on two legs. When I work, fish, or hunt, taking a Glock with me is as common as putting on boots. My father passed away suddenly 2 years after I started working with him. It was a terrible blow. For the first time in my life, I really didn't know what to do. I didn't have any plans. The company had no succession plan, and the bankers didn't trust me to run the business. After all my contacts with bankers, I began to have problems with self-confidence. Luckily, one of my father's competitors bought the company and offered me a job. It was there that I started dating the girl I had the longest relationship with, the boss's daughter, Beverly. I had no self-confidence, and I still don't understand how I managed to win Beverly. I would like to think that it was all about my 188 centimeters height, blonde hair, blue eyes, and attractive appearance. But to be honest, the matter was completely different. I'm barely 183 centimeters, slightly above average in appearance, with mousy brown hair, brown eyes, and a phobia of first dates. I repeat again, how I was able to conquer Beverly, I will never know. Beverly was my biggest fan. She thought I rocked the moon for her. When her father didn't want to promote me, she called our competitors and told them about me. She was successful, and I moved on to a competitor. When her father found out that Beverly was the one who initiated my departure, he felt betrayed. He gave her an ultimatum: either me or the family, no options. Beverly had a hard time telling me this through her tears. When I finally understood what she was saying, I told her that she had too much to lose by staying with me. If she stays, father will fight us every step of the way. She would lose the family trust, and most importantly, her family. I told her that if we were meant to be together, we would find each other again. No matter how painful it was better for her to stay with them and not with me. But I really missed Beverly. She was a lot of fun. We did everything together. Went to concerts, went to bars, danced, went to football matches, rode horses, walked, and much more. She was also an excellent poker player. And when it comes to sex, what can I say? I thought I knew about sex, but she actually taught me everything. Like I said, she was a real laugh and gave me my confidence back. You might be asking, if everything I say is true, why am I still single? As for relationships, I always take a long time. I'm terrible at reading signals of attraction and flirting, let alone doing it myself. Girls usually have to practically hit me in the head with a baseball bat to get me to pay attention to them. During this time, I had several semi-serious relationships after Beverly, but none of them were as intense. I think their failure is my fault, perhaps due to my carelessness. Enough about my past, let's get back to the fact that I'm broke. My dad must have been looking down on me because after I wrote my last check, I got a call from someone I worked for a few years ago. Richard Hines and his lovely wife Helen met me through Beverly. At that time, Richard had several projects that failed, and he needed to fix them, otherwise he would fail completely. Beverly told Richard how I could work with suppliers to lower prices for her father's company. At that point, Richard had nothing to lose, so he hired me as a project manager. Luckily for me, the previous manager was a complete idiot. He apparently purchased everything at the prices quoted by the suppliers, and there was so much waste on the project that he suffered losses. You didn't have to be a MIT graduate to understand what the problem was. I also found a design change that didn't compromise the aesthetics, but saved a lot of money. With all this in mind, I quickly got the project in order. When the project ended, everyone shared the profits and were satisfied. My share was enough to start my own business. Everything was going well for 2 years, and then this damn economic downturn, and I couldn't find a job, even for free. I was grateful for Richard's call. Any job would help me now, at least to pay the bills. Early Monday morning, I was in Richard's office, studying the project and taking in what he had in mind for me. Eventually, the conversation turned to finances, and Richard picked up the phone and asked his secretary to call Amy into his office. He explained that Amy is the company's chief financial officer. Richard added that she is extremely knowledgeable, tough as an arrow, and has a my way or no way attitude. He warned me to be careful with her. She is highly respected in the company because she has saved them from financial problems more than once. I immediately imagined a little gray old maid with gray hair, whose work is her whole life. How wrong I was. When the door opened, a beauty who looked like a Miss America pageant entered the office, dressed in a women's business suit, with her hair tied up in a bun and wearing framed dark glasses. The only thought that flashed through my head was my father's old phrase, "Damn, even a priest would put the Bible aside for that." Richard said, "Amy, this is Paul Rogers. Paul, this is Amy Gleason. Amy, Paul will be joining us as a project manager, but the job will be a little broader. In addition to his salary, we'll offer Paul a percentage of the cost savings he generates for us. I'll handle the contract. Between us and Paul, but I need you to set up an accounting system so we can track Paul's progress. We're also offering Paul a signing bonus of $15,000. Thank God, now I can pay the bills and have dinner tonight. Paul," Richard continued, "just do your job like you've done on our other projects, and Amy will make you look like a genius on paper." I was so stunned that I didn't know what to say. I hope I didn't seem like a complete idiot. I don't really remember what I said. I just noticed that Amy never addressed me directly. She spoke exclusively to Richard. After she came out, I noticed that she was a very beautiful woman. Richard agreed, but warned me not to create illusions that she was a real snow queen. Every man in the state tried to hit on her, but no one was successful. He said he knew she was lonely and noted that there were no photographs of her family or anyone else in her office. According to him, she was a complete social and personal recluse. It didn't matter to me. I knew she was completely out of my league. I started work that same day, and it didn't take long for me to bump into Amy. I submitted several purchase requests, and Amy made it very clear that I did not understand the process. While I was talking to her on the phone, my computer beeped for a new email. I opened it up, and it was a step-by-step guide to the financial application process. This girl clearly knew her stuff. On Tuesday, I discovered several outstanding invoices that the previous manager, again a complete idiot, had not paid. It looks like they weren't even placed on orders, so I registered them as an expense account and sent them. On Wednesday morning, my phone rang. Who do you think it was? Amy informed me that this was not in accordance with company policy. If I have any unauthorized payments, I need to get Richard or another supervisor's signature on them. Since it was obvious that I did not understand the company's financial policies, she offered to conduct a little training in her office on Friday morning. My eyes rolled back, but I agreed to meet on Friday at 10 a.m. It was a moment from which I wanted to escape, and over the next 2 days I looked forward to this meeting with horror. On Friday at 10 o'clock, I was sitting in Amy's office across from her. She was in her usual business suit, with her hair tied up and black glasses. Why did I feel like I was being called to the school principal? After a grueling 30 minutes of, "You have to do this and that," she said that to make sure I was on the right track, we might need 2 more follow-up meetings. We made appointments for the next 2 Fridays at 10 a.m. I felt like a beaten puppy and tried to quickly leave her office. As I stood up, I thought for a moment about the deep shit I was in. I guess I stayed too long. When I looked back, Amy asked, "What are you looking for? Have you lost something?" Without thinking, I replied, "No, I just didn't want to step on the lost souls of all those guys who tried to court you." I quickly looked up, realizing what I had just said. She looked at me with a look that could kill me. But then she burst out laughing. She didn't just giggle, but loudly, hysterically, to the point of tears. Even the secretary behind the door started looking at her as if she had never heard Amy laugh before. As her laughter began to die down, she looked at me and jokingly said, "Get out of my office, cowboy," apparently referring to my boots and gun. Don't think that I was able to completely atone for my guilt towards Amy. She still called me a few times the next week, but the conversations were more pleasant. Time flew quickly, and soon the next Friday arrived. Amy looked different this time. She was wearing a pencil skirt with a side slit and a silk blouse. But no matter what outfit Amy wore, she always looked beautiful. As I walked into her office and sat down, Amy laid out the 3 charts she had prepared in front of me. This once again proved that the girl knew exactly what she was doing. The spreadsheets were a combination of what I needed to do to comply with corporate policy and how I needed to track my financial progress to receive the bonus. The word bonus immediately caught my attention. Numbers and tables are not my thing, and I think she sensed my uneasiness about what she was proposing. After the third time I was unable to understand certain lines, she stood up, walked around the table, and began instructing me, standing behind me. At first I thought it was my imagination, but the second and third time it seemed to me that she accidentally touched me. I'm sure she didn't do it consciously, but my imagination ran wild. In my number-clouded mind, I left her office, deciding that I would spend the weekend trying to make sense of her suggestions and dreaming about her breasts. The third week flew by. I called Amy myself a few times this week to make sure I was filling out the spreadsheets correctly. On Friday at 10 a.m., as usual, I was sitting in her office, completely confused. Why, you ask? Perhaps it was Friday casual, because Amy was wearing jeans that fit her figure perfectly and a sheer cream blouse that showed the outline of her bra and what was inside it. Damn, she looked stunning. As she sat at her desk and looked at the tables I presented, she simply commented, "You're a fast learner, little jumper." This comment relieved some of the tension, but it was not the most important event of the day. As I was about to leave, Amy walked up to me from the table. I stood at the door, and she told me to wait, saying that she forgot to give me some documents. She turned and leaned over the table to reach it. She turned around and asked, "What is it?" Caught. I was definitely looking at her butt. When she straightened up, I quickly said, "Nice jeans." Walking closer to me, she asked, "What about what's in them?" I replied, "I have no personal experience, but the word intoxicating comes to mind." Amy came close to me and said, "And?" I replied, "So what?" Slightly annoyed, Amy asked, "Are you going to ask me out or not, you idiot?" Confused, I muttered, "Would you like to go out with me sometime?" She replied, "Yes." Turning and returning to her desk, Amy said, "You can pick me up from the house at 6:30. I'll text you the address. Don't plan anything special. I won't have time to change." Completely dumbfounded, I couldn't think of anything to say. Amy waved her hand, indicating that I could go. As I turned to leave, I heard her say, "God, what does a girl have to do to get asked out?" Confirmation that I had not imagined this was a message from Amy with her home address that arrived on my phone before I could leave the building. On the way to the construction site, the first question that ran through my head was, why me? I was clearly not the handsome guy she could date. In the end, I decided that it doesn't matter. The second question was where to go. Driving past the Comedy Zone, I thought it was a good decision. The food there wasn't particularly impressive, but the entertainment was good. So I stopped and bought 2 tickets for the show, which started at 7 p.m. I spent the rest of the day thinking. Not having time to do anything, I decided to go home early to take a shower and get ready for the evening. Amy lived in a very nice gated community. Apparently, she warned the guard in advance, since he had already prepared a pass for me. As I drove up to her house, I saw that it exactly matched my idea of where Amy should live. Large, conservative, but with a twist. At exactly 6:30, I was standing at her door. She opened the door, said, "Hi," took her purse, and walked out. Amy didn't hesitate to get into the passenger seat of my truck. On the way to the comedy zone, the conversation did not go well. It was mainly about work or consisted of questions that could be answered yes or no. The evening didn't start well, and I thought it might be a long night. But when we sat down and started having dinner at the comedy zone, things took a different turn. I noted that she had a really nice house. She replied that it was not hers. Some of her friends were transferred abroad, and she agreed to look after their home for 3 years until they returned. The rent was low, and it certainly made financial sense. Her furniture was stored in Las Vegas, where she lived before working for Richard's company, and in New York before that. Other than that, and the fact that her parents were dead, I didn't learn much about Miss Gleason. I moved my chair closer to Amy to get a better view of the stage. The show began, and from the first minutes of the comedian's performance, it was filled with sexual innuendo. I wasn't sure how Amy would take it, whether she would be embarrassed or become a real lady. But when I heard her laugh and how she continued to laugh throughout the show, I knew she was okay. Several times when she laughed, I noticed her touching my arm and looking at me. Towards the end of the performance, Amy put her hand on my thigh. I covered her hand with mine, and she did not remove it. When we left, we held hands. She really seemed to enjoy it. The show ended at 9:30, too early to go home, so I asked if there was anything else she wanted to do. She left the decision up to me. I told her about a little bar I like that always has live music. Amy agreed. We found a table across from the bar, and I learned that she liked Blue Moon. After a few songs, I asked her to dance. Although it was a little awkward at first, by the end she was confident on her feet. When the next slow song came on, she asked me to dance again. I kept her with some distance between us, but it didn't last long. Amy came closer, laid her head on my chest, and it seemed as if she simply disappeared into my arms. At that moment, I noticed it for the first time sparkles. As we danced, Amy looked at me and smiled. I could have sworn there was a sparkle in her eyes. We danced again, this time to faster music, but when the next slow song came on, she didn't let me go. She pressed herself against me again, and about halfway through the song, she stood on her tiptoes and gave me the most tender kiss I had ever experienced. When she smiled back at me, I noticed that her eyes sparkled. When we returned to our table, our beers were already empty. Amy said that this round was on her and headed towards the bar, which was about 15 meters away from us. Not even 10 seconds after she ordered a beer, a rather attractive bar regular walked up to her and asked, "Are you here alone?" She turned, pointed in my direction, and loudly replied, "See that guy? That's my boyfriend." He continued to insist, asking her to dance. She turned to him with a look that would have made even a walrus freeze and said sharply, "Fuck off." If someone had listened, they could have heard the lost soul of another unfortunate person falling to the floor. When she returned, I asked, "Any problems?" "Nothing I can't handle," she replied. "So I'm your boyfriend?" I asked. Amy simply smiled, and with those same sparkles in her eyes said, "Let's go dance." When we arrived at her house, I kissed her on the threshold. She opened the door and said, "Good night." I asked, "Will you invite me in?" She answered firmly, "Paul, I don't do one-time sex. If that's what you want," she said, pointing to the area between her legs, "you should be ready for a long-term relationship. Good night, cowboy." I calmly left. The next morning, I called her and asked her out. We had a great time that afternoon, just walking around the park, visiting the zoo, and having dinner in the evening. We met again on Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday, just having dinner since they were weekdays. On Friday, we went to a party with friends. We planned to go to the cinema on Saturday, but plans changed during dinner. There were a few pauses in the conversation on Saturday night, and Amy asked if everything was okay. I said, Amy, I've really enjoyed our time together over the last week, but I looked at Amy and she looked scared. I later found out that she thought I was going to end our relationship. But, I continued, I'm becoming more and more interested in you. My time without you is becoming empty, and I want to spend more and more time with you. Amy beamed and motioned with her finger for me to lean closer. She kissed me, and as we parted, she whispered in my ear, "Take me home and make love." Considering how smart Amy is, I thought I might be in for a challenge, but I was ready for it. I don't think we got out of bed on Sunday except to eat. Images of all the good times in my life flashed through my head. I told her that I had never felt closer to another person. This led to a conversation about the exclusivity of the relationship, which we both agreed to. On Monday morning, straight as an arrow, Amy and I went to Richard and told him about our relationship. Richard brought our request to the board of directors, who gave us permission, making an exception to the corporate policy regarding relationships between colleagues. However, there was one condition. We had to keep our emotions and actions out of the workplace. I also received praise and encouragement from Richard. Even his wife Helen called to congratulate us. I always thought she was a wonderful woman. Over time, our relationship grew closer, and I had never felt so connected to another person. The sex was just great. We saw each other every day, and I spent several nights with her over the next week. As the weekend ended, Amy raised an important issue, and I moved in with her the following week. A few months later, Amy called Helen and asked her to be a bridesmaid at our wedding and Richard to be best man. That weekend, the four of us went to Reno. With eyes full of sparkle, Amy and I said our IDOS. The work really paid off for me and things were going well. I got a promotion and the bonuses were huge. Amy took care of all our finances and I just worked and she managed the money. With her salary, which was quite decent, she began to invest part of our surplus. Shortly after our wedding, the lease on the house Amy was living in came to an end and we began looking for a new home. I asked her, "What kind of house do you want?" "I want a house with 4 bedrooms, 3 or 4 bathrooms, and an open floor plan," she replied. I said, "Isn't this house too big for the two of us?" Her answer stunned me. With eyes full of sparkles, she said, "I want to fill all these bedrooms with your children." I never thought about becoming a father, but remembering my father, I became truly inspired. In a casual conversation, I mentioned to Richard about house hunting. He said that one specimen had just appeared on the market near him that matched the description. Amy and I went to see it, and she loved it. The whole way home, our conversation was about the house and what she could do with it. I didn't want to drop my other shoe, but I finally said, "Honey, this house is worth $1,135,000. We'll never be able to afford it, especially if you get pregnant." She said these are her specialties and don't worry about me. We bought a house and somehow miraculously got financing. When we closed the deal, I noticed on the closing report that we had contributed $275,000. I thought we must be doing better than I thought and asked Amy about it after closing. She said that this was her kingdom and there was no need to worry. After we moved in, Helen called Amy and invited us to dinner, which was a nice break from unpacking boxes from Las Vegas. At dinner, Helen brought up the topic of children. Amy told her that we were considering the issue, but we really counted on her salary. Richard overheard the conversation and said that after all we had done for the company, he thought he could convince the board of directors to agree to Amy working from home. The board approved her to work from home several days a week, and she immediately began working from home. The thought of these children was already on the horizon. There was a dance at a local club and Helen called and asked if we wanted to go along. We didn't have a chance to meet many of our neighbors, and we thought it would be a good idea, so we went. The dinner was great, and the dance group was in full swing. Richard asked Amy to dance, and they fell to the floor. About halfway through the song, an older, tall, slender man intervened, and Richard returned to the table. As I watched, I noticed that Amy looked upset. The older man leaned over, whispered something in her ear, then let it slip. Amy pushed him away and screamed, Asshole. I was furious. Amy stood in front of me, blocking me, and said, "This isn't worth it, take me home." I did as she asked. I didn't realize how much this incident affected Amy, but she started acting a step away from her old self, and things kept getting worse. The only thing that helped the situation was the ability to work from home. This lasted about 3 weeks. That Friday morning, I had a meeting with Richard. We were supposed to meet at our favorite breakfast spot. Amy worked from home. She had just gotten up when I ran out the door. I shouted to her that I was leaving the door as I left. My meeting with Richard ended around 10:30. In my haste, I left a contract that I needed for the supplier later that day. I had to return to the house. As I drove up to the house, I noticed a red Maserati in the driveway. I walked through the kitchen door, and then my utopian life changed. I heard voices upstairs. As I walked up the stairs, I heard a man's voice. My heart sank. Turning the corner into our bedroom, I looked through the crack in the door and saw my wife with some man. I pulled out my Glock and fired into the far upper corner of the room. I told him, "Go away." He went to look for his clothes on the floor. I gave up the Glock and said, "No." I took him out naked and locked the door. I looked at Amy again when I saw him off. She was lying on the bed. Having locked the front door behind the man, I returned upstairs. Amy wasn't in the bedroom, but I noticed that the bathroom door was locked. One kick and the door opened. Amy stood there, wrapped in a towel, crying uncontrollably as the shower turned on. I said, "After you finish, leave." I closed the door, went into the attic, took 2 suitcases, brought them back, and put them in front of the bathroom door. I went downstairs and began to think about what to do next. I called my friend at the bank, asked him to withdraw everything from the joint accounts, open the account in my name only, and I would come in a while to officially set up the account. He said he would do it. I started calling all the credit card companies and canceling all my cards. I made a list of what I need to get. Apart from going to the bank and opening a new account, I needed to have some cash with me and a credit card in my name only. I needed to go to Lowe's and buy 3 new door locks. I called the afternoon meeting and canceled it. While I was making the list, about 30 minutes passed. I heard Amy coming up the stairs. There was a knock on my front door. I went to answer and found 2 police officers there. As I opened the door, one officer said, "Hands up," noticing the Glock next to me. I raised my hands and thrust my hip towards the officer. He pulled out a Glock, took out the clip, removed the curved bullet, and handed it back to me. After introducing himself, he asked, "Do you know the guy in the back seat of my car?" I looked and said, "No." He said they had a complaint about a nude streamer in the neighborhood. When they picked him up, he told them that he came from this house. They asked me what happened. I told them I caught that guy with his wife and threw him out. They asked if they could have his clothes, keys, and wallet. I told them that everything in my house belongs to me unless they have a warrant to get something. They thanked me and said that they would take him to the station. They turned to leave, and as one of them walked away, he tapped me on the shoulder and said, "I feel for you, man." I went back to the kitchen to finish my list. At least another half hour passed before Amy came downstairs, dragging her suitcase with her. When she came to the kitchen, it broke again. That's when I noticed her eyes. The shine disappeared, replaced by dark, empty red eyes. Sobbing, she said, "I wish this had never happened. I want you to know that I love you and only you." I said, "That's a great way to show it. No pun intended. Now come out." This made her cry. Having calmed down a little, she put in front, I sealed the letter, and left the kitchen door to the garage. I haven't heard anything for a long time. I got up to check, and she was sitting in her car with her head on the steering wheel and crying. About 5 minutes later, I heard the car start and closed the garage door as she left. I locked the house and continued to do everything on the list. At the bank, I signed all the documents, put $2,000 in cash in 100 bills in my pocket, and filled out an application for a new credit card. Then I went to Lowe's, bought locks, and on the way home, I made one of the most important stops. I stopped at a liquor store and bought 2 bottles of Wild Turkey 101. I changed the locks and realized the Maserati was still sitting in my driveway. I called a tow truck. While I was waiting for him, I went upstairs and took the keys out of his trouser pocket. I opened his car, lifted the hood, and then went back to the garage. I took a sledgehammer and poured out all my anger on his engine. It was the most expensive sex of his life. I collected his remaining clothes and, with the exception of his driver's license, burned everything in the fire pit in the backyard. The driver's license said his name was Finnegan Martin with an address in Las Vegas. Who the hell is Finnegan Martin? Finally, a tow truck arrived and took away this wreck. When I finished all the things on the list, I returned to the house and sat down at the kitchen table. I saw the letter, and then the realization of everything that had happened really hit me. I laid my head on the table and, for the first time in many years, burst into tears like a child. The next 36 hours passed in a blur. I remember going to the downstairs bathroom and mixing too many turkey cocktails, but that's where the memories end. Mostly I sat in the kitchen. Late Saturday night, I spent a long time staring at the fired cartridge in the middle of the table and the Glock lying next to me. It seemed to me that if I just shot myself, the pain would disappear. On Sunday around 2 a.m., in one of my lucid moments, I decided to read the letter. My dear Paul, the words sorry alone are not enough. This is much more than just an apology, because I understand the pain I have filled your life with and the devastation I am experiencing myself. I am absolutely heartbroken that I brought this into our marriage and that I was the one who dealt this blow. I know you may never speak to me again, so I want you to know how I feel. First of all, and most importantly, I love you more than life itself. I can't imagine a day without you. From our first meeting, I knew that you were the one and the only one for me. There are many things in my life that I never told you about and hoped that you would never know. Finn, who means absolutely nothing to me, is part of this dark past. I want you to know that it was never about you. You are the perfect, loving husband, more than one woman can deserve. You completely satisfy all my desires and needs. I always saw us growing old together. It's me and my dark past that brought this into our marriage, and for that I will never forgive myself. I have a desperate urge to tell you everything, but I know now is not the time. I hope you find it in your heart to give me a chance to explain myself. After this, I will accept any of your decisions about our life together. But there is one thing I want you to always remember. I love you with all my soul, heart, body, and mind. I can't bear the thought of life without you. Please give me a chance to explain. I love you, forever. Now, this email led to another round of drinks, and I was back into a turkey-drunken state. I must have fallen asleep. Helen called me around 8 a.m. She asked if she could come in. In my foggy head, I told her I was in the kitchen and for her to come through the kitchen door. I opened the garage. When Helen came in, I was still looking at the fired cartridge. The first thing she said was, "Paul, I can't talk to you while the gun is on the table. Give me the gun." I pushed it towards her, and she took it, putting it in her purse. She also threw the bottle of turkey in the trash. I said, "Amy isn't here. I don't know where she is, and frankly, I don't care." Helen replied, "I know Amy has been with me since Friday, and yes, you care. Now let's go upstairs." She put my hand on her shoulder and helped me up to the bedroom. As we entered the room, Helen exclaimed, "What happened here?" I said, pointing to the bed. "This is where I found them." Helen noticed the destroyed bathroom door as we passed by. She turned on the shower and started taking off my clothes. As she took off my shorts, I asked, "Are we going to have sex, Helen?" Helen replied, "No, you're going to take a shower because you smell like a garbage can." The shower was cold but necessary. Most of the time, I just sat under the running water and cried. When I got out of the shower and dried off, I noticed that Helen had taken the sheets off the bed, made it with clean sheets, and put out fresh clothes for me. When I got dressed and returned to the kitchen, Helen was making coffee and cleaning up. After the second cup of coffee, Helen sat down opposite me and just watched. I asked, "Did she tell you?" Helen replied, "Most of it. She cried all day Friday, and it took me most of Saturday to make sense of what she was saying through her tears. I finally understood what happened." I asked, "Is she okay?" Helen replied, "Oh, dear Paul, no. Until you and her are together, she will never be okay." I said, "She has a very strange way of showing it." Helen replied sternly, "Stop it. Don't you dare talk about her like that." After a long pause, Helen asked, "Have you read the letter?" I answered, "Yes." She said, "Paul, you need to talk to her. There's a lot you don't know. There's a lot you need to find out. It'll never erase what happened, but you'll find out why. You need to know. You'll talk to her." I must admit, her letter piqued my interest, and I wanted to know what she was talking about. I thought, nothing can hurt me anymore, so why not? With my head down and a whisper, I said, "Yes, I'll talk to her." She said, "Okay, I'll send it now." A few minutes later, I heard Amy open the door. She timidly entered the kitchen, nervously fiddling with her hands. I motioned for her to sit down. Still sobbing, Amy said, "I don't even know where to start." I said, "Why don't you start with who he is?" "His name is Finnegan Finn Martin." I said, "Who the hell is Finn Martin?" Amy replied, "Finn Martin was. He sold sex to me to others." I thought nothing could hurt me anymore, but it hit me right in the face like a brick. My mouth opened, my ears began to ring, and I began to feel short of breath. Amy grabbed my hand and said, "I know what you're thinking, but please, please let me explain." I pulled my hand away, straightened up in my chair, and said, "Continue." She said, "I'll start from the beginning. My mother died unexpectedly. My father was a disabled Vietnam veteran. He took her death seriously. Before she died, he was drinking, but after that he began to drink even more. Sometimes he became very violent. My mother worked as a waitress, and after her death, we could not live only on his disability benefits, so I got a job as a waitress in the same restaurant where my mother worked. They probably took pity on me. They allowed me to work double shifts, fed me, and I was allowed to take the leftover food home for my father. Life was unbearable. I buried my father. All the remaining money was spent on the funeral. I couldn't afford to live where we lived, so I packed up everything I could take and moved into the women's room. Shelter. I continued to work double shifts until one day I served a wealthy woman. She said, "You're so sweet. I'm sure your parents are proud of you." I replied that my parents died. She asked, "Are you supporting yourself here?" I said I was living in a shelter until I found something better. She replied, "I work at a talent agency and you're so beautiful. I'm sure my boss will find you a job. Do you want to meet him?" Of course, I was delighted. I was ready to do anything to get out of the shelter. She gave me her business card and told me to come to her office the next day at 2 p.m. I had nothing to wear and had to work the morning shift, so I showed up in my waitress uniform. At exactly 14 o'clock, I was sitting in her office. After some small talk, she took me into a large office to introduce me to her boss, Finnegan Martin. Mr. Martin said to April, that was the woman's name, "April, you were right. Miss Harding, that was my last name at the time, is charming. I think you're right, she should work for us." Finn said he would give me my own apartment and advance me money to live on. He'll ask April to help me buy new clothes because I couldn't meet their clients dressed like that. He provided the initial money for everything, and I could pay him back over time. He also said that his business was related to a certain sexual area and asked if I would have a problem with that. I replied that I didn't know anything about sex, but I was ready to learn. He said that he and April would train me. He seemed very excited about me and said that we could make a lot of money together if I agreed. I said yes, and he gave me $1,000 advance. April took me to choose an apartment that same day. The next day, I quit my job as a waitress and moved into my new apartment. For the next week, April was my companion. We went shopping and bought all kinds of clothes. Casual, evening dresses and evening dresses, lingerie, stockings, everything. She took me to a beauty salon where I got a new look, from my hair to my nails and makeup. I went to the doctor and started taking pills. They even helped me get a passport. At the end of the week, you wouldn't recognize me. Monday marked the beginning of my training in their office. I was shocked to learn that April was called Finn's main bitch. She was the one who knew everything about his business and recruited new employees. She was supposed to be my mentor. She taught me all the basics of sex. A month has passed. When they thought I was ready, Finn said he had my first job. He asked April to come home with me and pack my bag. She also had to accompany me to my first job. The next morning, I was at McCarran Private Airport in Las Vegas. After minimal security, we boarded a private Gulfstream jet and headed to Sudan. During the flight, April taught me the rules of etiquette when interacting with a member of the Sudanese royal family. When we arrived, we were taken to the most luxurious apartment I could imagine. We were served by servants who attended to our every need. A few hours after arriving, it was show time. April led me to the door of the Sheikh's room. I knocked, and he invited me in. I must say that at first he was gentle with me, but then he took it in full. We returned the next day. Upon arrival, Finn split the proceeds with me after deducting all expenses and returning his starting money. My share was $17,500. I was hooked. I was taught to suppress my emotions because they lead to problems. The essence of business is to get money, not pleasure, not love, not desires or affection. Finn started giving me task after task. I made a lot of money and made a lot of mistakes. Although we were in Las Vegas, we were not handling any conference clients. This is what street girls did. Our business has been with big players and wealthy businessmen all over the world. Those who respected me treated me well and paid me big money. The sheikh apparently told the kingdom about my services because I flew on his private jet to the Middle East at least once a month, as well as to other places in Europe, as Finn indicated. I saved money in several safe deposit boxes. I earned so much that I didn't know what to do with it. I asked one of my older and rich gentlemen what I should do with the money. He introduced me to his financial advisor. He said that he could do miracles. Indeed, he was able to turn dirty money here in the US into clean and legal money through his network in the Cayman Islands, but only a little at a time. But even this was not enough to hide all the money. So every time I flew to the Middle East or Europe, I brought suitcases with money and made transfers to the Caymans. Watching a financial advisor work, I wanted to learn what he does. Thanks to my flexible schedule, I attended the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and received a degree in accounting. Despite working with high-end clients and taking all the precautions, it is a brutal business. After one terrible weekend, I decided enough was enough. As I watched Finn run his business, I noticed that those who tried to get away from him often ended up dead in the desert, so I carefully planned my escape. There is a dark side to Las Vegas where money can buy everything. I found someone who helped me create a new identity, including a birth certificate, driver's license, social security number, as well as fictitious education and work history, and a new passport in the name of Amy Gleason. I put my things in storage, took out enough money to live on for a few years, and disappeared overnight. I took a job as an accountant in New York, specializing in international investments. After a year, I had learned a lot, but it became obvious that I needed to leave after I rejected my boss's advances. Thinking the danger was over, I returned to Henderson and took a job at Richard's company. When Richard's company started having financial difficulties and no bank was willing to help them, I went to the board of directors and offered them a source of financing with a 10% commission and an 18% interest rate. This was their last hope, and they happily agreed. I did this through my financial advisor and an account in Cayman, so the board of directors didn't know that I was their benefactor. 2 days later, the company had $500,000 in its account. They thought I had performed a miracle. Everything went well, and the money was returned to me with interest and commission. The company grew rapidly and soon found itself in financial trouble again, this time to the tune of over $1 million. The board of directors asked me to arrange the loan again. I did this, and they received the money within 2 days. I got my money back with interest and fees, and the board of directors personally gave me a bonus. They never knew that I was the one who saved them. When we were buying a house and needed a down payment, I took the money from an account in Cayman. There is a lot of money in this account, and I would give every last cent of it if it would help fix the situation. 3 years passed, and I already thought that Finn would no longer appear in my life. But somehow he found me and showed up at the dance. When he started dancing with me, he whispered that he had photos, and if I didn't sleep with him, he would send them to you. On Monday, he called me at work and told me that I was too valuable to him and that he wanted me to come back to work for him or else he would create big problems for me. I agreed to meet him at the motel on Wednesday. On Monday, he called again and asked to repeat the meeting, and I met with him again on Wednesday. That Tuesday he called, but this time he didn't want to go to the motel. He wanted to sleep with me in our marital bed, hoping to break me and force me to return to him. I was amazed. I couldn't believe she was telling me all this. She continued, "Paul, you need to prepare yourself. I know Finn. He will make good on his threat. It pains me to tell you this, but I do feel ashamed that I've slept with a lot of men." I asked, "Was what happened between us fake too?" She replied, "Oh no, my love. When you're in this business, you learn to suppress all emotions and feelings to keep your sanity. Most girls have addictions. I learned to suppress my emotions. Without emotions, it's just work. Without attachment and worries, just income. After I left Finn, I didn't have a single man until I met you. During this time, I regained my confidence and separated myself from my past. And then you came into my life. From our first meeting, I knew that you were the only one for me. That first time with you was the first time I could truly express my true emotions and desires. I am so emotionally attached to you that I would do anything to protect you and our marriage. I really love you." I sat in silence. There was too much to process. I ended up getting angry with her and asking her to leave. She left in tears. An hour or so passed, and I still couldn't figure out the situation. Helen called me again and asked if I could come over. Less than 5 minutes later, she walked through the door. She had a pack of beer in her hands. She sat down and opened 2 bottles. She said, "Okay, stop feeling sorry for yourself. Get your head out of your ass and let's figure it out. What's bothering you?" I replied, "Helen, it's strange, but I don't care about her past at all. It was all before me and was an eternity ago. I wish she would tell me. I think I could live with it. The only thing I see before my eyes, this is the scene in our bedroom." "So," Helen reasoned, "if someone knew you shot a person, or if you did something terrible, and they blackmailed you out of going to jail, would you pay?" "Yes, but this is different." Helen said, "No, not something else. Someone knew about a terrible episode in Amy's life, kept her in fear, and she was ready to do everything to keep this secret from being revealed. And now, if someone had kidnapped Amy, would you pay the ransom?" "Until today, yes, in the blink of an eye." Helen continued, "Well, this is your decision point. You yourself are ready to do anything to keep something from your past secret. Now the image of Finn is a ransom for Amy. You have to decide whether you are ready to pay this ransom to spend the rest of your life with your wife. No one can make that decision for you." "Helen, would you do this?" I asked. "Oh, dear Paul, if it meant protecting my marriage or my children, I'd strip off in Times Square and give you half an hour to gather a crowd and watch me have sex. Think about it. Your future is on the line. And only you can decide your fate." I went home. "If you need anything, call." I thanked Helen and she left. God, what a day. What a weekend. The more I thought about what Helen said, the more it made sense. I knew that I really loved Amy, otherwise I would not have felt such strong emotions. Do I want to live my life without her? Can I get this image out of my head? I wrestled with these questions for hours. It was 6 p.m. on Sunday. I called Helen and asked her to tell Richard that I needed to take some personal time from work. I had a few things to take care of. Then I asked him to pass the phone to Amy. A quick hello came from the other end. I said, "I'm hungry, do you want to eat?" She quickly replied, "Yes." I said I'd pick her up in a minute. When I arrived at Helen's, I didn't have to go out to get her. She ran out to my car. Her face was covered in red spots. She had no makeup on. Her eyes were tear-stained, and her hair was disheveled. Despite this, she was beautiful. We went to a restaurant that was located not far from our house. There were many pauses in the conversation, and sometimes there was silence at the table. We both tried to talk about something minor, but the huge elephant in the room was clearly getting in the way. Finally, I told her that we needed to find a lawyer on Monday morning. She immediately gasped and burst into tears, thinking it was for a divorce. After I calmed her down, I explained that Finn would never leave us alone and he could ruin our reputation. The only way out is to fight it. I said I wasn't sure if we could repair our relationship, but for the sake of our future, we had to stop him. I asked her to write down everything she remembered about her relationship with Finn. She said she could do better. Although the information is outdated, she has a copy of April's hard drive on a flash drive, which is kept in a safe in Las Vegas, with details of Finn's activities. I think Amy was disappointed when I took her back to Helen, but I was completely exhausted that day. I returned home and slept well for the first time in 3 days. I'm glad Amy warned me because, true to his word, Finn tried to completely destroy our marriage and force Amy to return to him. Monday morning, I received a large package from Ups. I opened it and saw only half of the first photo. It was Amy with a rather solid-looking man with dark skin. I took the package out to the backyard to the fire. I didn't even want to be tempted to look at the other photos. Amy stayed with Helen for the entire week while we worked on our case together. With Richard's help, we found the best politically connected lawyer we could hire. We paid him a fee of $25,000, met him, and told him our story. He contacted the Nevada Attorney General, who offered Amy a deal. If she turned over the flash drive and agreed to testify before the grand jury against Finn, she would be granted immunity. If the case goes to trial, she will be able to testify anonymously behind a curtain to keep her identity secret. It was a total win for us. The following weekend, news reports reported that a Las Vegas man had been indicted by a grand jury on international human trafficking charges as a result of a joint investigation by the state of Nevada and federal authorities. They showed a video of Finn, handcuffed, walking towards a prison van. Finn has more problems than just following us. I told Amy that we needed to celebrate and suggested we go out to dinner. She agreed. The restaurant we went to had dance music playing. After dinner and a few drinks, a slow song started playing. Amy stood up and came over to me, as always, hugging me. While dancing, I asked, "Do you love me?" She looked me straight in the eye, and with that sparkle that I loved so much, she answered, "More than anything." I said, "Let's go home." As we lay in bed that night, after turning out the lights, I asked, "Amy, how much money is in that account in Cayman?" We both burst out laughing. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.